So I think we had better start just on time, even though we don't have full audience today. Well, today we prepared the interpreters for Korean and English, so you can use either Korean or English.
I can speak in Korean.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kimura. So, well, we are going to discuss about the new leadership with new partners in Asia. We have five presenters today, and first we will start with Mr. Harold Antenna. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes for the first presentation. Then I'm going to give you some questions to each of one. Then we can have the free discussion session. And if there are any questions from the floor, then we will take the floor and have the question. 자, 그러면은 제가 먼저 you can use the interpreter apparatus. I'm going to speak.
Yes.
I'm going to speak first.
Okay.
지금 우리는 미국의 트럼프 대통령이 출범한 이후에 트럼프 정권이 출범한 이후에 새로운 소위 변화의 시대로 접어들었다 이렇게 얘기를 하고 있습니다. 그 변화의 핵심은 불확실성 또는 불가측성이라고 얘기를 하죠. 그러니까 uncertainty와 unpredictability가 지금 이 변화의 핵심으로 되어 있습니다. 트럼프 대통령은 처음에 나와서 America First, 미국 우선주의죠. 그리고 Make America Great Again, 미국을 다시 위대하게 라는 캐치프레이즈로 나왔는데 이것이 미국의 신고립주의를 의미하는 것인지 또 지난 정권의 아시아 회귀 정책 또는 아시아 재균형 정책 Pivot to Asia 또는 Rebalancing in Asia와 어떠한 관련을 갖는지 동아시아의 국제 질서가 어떻게 변화할지에 대해서 많은 사람들이 관심을 갖고 또 거기에 대한 대응책을 마련하고 있습니다. 미국은 러시아와의 밀월 관계를 저희가 예상하게끔 했습니다만 또 최근에는 시리아 폭격 사태라든지 러시아와의 시크릿 채널, 비밀 채널 마련에 대한 여러 가지 스캔들 때문에 약간의 어떤 지금 스무스한 그러한 관계 진전에 좀 장애가 생겼다고 일단 보여집니다. 또한 중국과도 처음엔 상당히 대립 관계에 있을 것 같았는데 북한 핵 문제를 비롯해서 중국과의 협조가 긴밀해지는 또 필요한 그런 상황 하에서 다른 문제들은 좀 부차적인 문제로 이렇게 되는 경향을 보이고 있습니다. 또 그 가운데서 일본은 미국과의 관계를 긴밀히 하면서 혹시 이 지역에서 미국의 어떤 힘의 공백이 나타날 상황에 대비해서 또 그러한 명목으로 군사력을 늘리면서 이 지역에서의 발언권을 높이려고 하고 있습니다. 또 이런 와중에 북한의 김정은은 한동안 잠잠하는 듯 하다가 올해 들어서 특히 미중 정상회담 이후 또 한국의 새로운 진보 정권 출범 이후에 오히려 미사일 발사 실험을 지금 더 자주 하면서 미국과 국제사회 그리고 한국 새로운 정부의 반응을 떠보고 있습니다. 또 이러한 가운데 한국에는 문재인 정권이 출범을 해서 북한과의 관계를 중시하는 입장을 보이면서 이것이 북한 핵 문제 해결과 어떻게 상관관계를 보일지에 대해서 많은 관심을 기울일 필요가 있다고 봅니다. 즉 동아시아는 새로운 질서 변환기에 있다라고 보여지는데 오늘 이런 것들을 바탕으로 해서 앞으로 동아시아의 국제 질서가 어떻게 이루어질 것인지 그리고 한반도의 비핵화에 대해서는 어떻게 전망하는지 등에 대해서 우리 5분의 학자들을 모시고 오늘 이야기를 듣도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 소개를 먼저 드리면 먼저 그 Mr. Tanner, Harold Tanner from University of North Texas. Mr. Tanner. 인사만 하세요. 간단히. 박수. Second speaker will be Mr. Ho Tae-hwe from Sunmun University in Korea. And third presenter is Mr. Kimura Kan from Kobe University in Japan. And the fourth is Sergei Sebastianov from Far Eastern Federal University in Russia. Great. And Mr. Lee Wie from Center for Northeast Asian Studies, the Pangol Institute from China. 자, 그럼 아까 말씀드린 대로 처음 Mr. Tanner부터 시작을 하겠습니다. Mr. Tanner, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the organizers of the Jeju Forum and the Jeju Peace Institute for the very kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here. So I've been asked to talk about President Donald Trump's East Asia policy, and I'm a little bit concerned because it's almost morning in America, and he might wake up and tweet something that completely undermines whatever I say. So I'm going to argue that there are three sides to Donald Trump. As a candidate, Donald Trump gave the... We can go to the next slide. Should I say when we want to move slides? Or as a candidate, Donald Trump gives the impression that he would be very, very different. He was a kind of a loose cannon. As president, I'm going to argue, and I'm going to frame this very, very carefully. I want to say that to a degree, it seems that Donald Trump has been moving toward a more status quo conservative position with regards to his foreign policy. And I chose all those words very carefully. So that's what I want to look at, because he's also bringing his own style to the White House, and his own style is a transactional style of foreign policy. It's the style of a businessman. So next slide. We can begin with Trump, the candidate. He's on the campaign trail, as you're all very familiar. He gave the impression that he was a loose cannon, that he was all over the place, that he was making very radical remarks, and they gave the appearance that he was ignorant of foreign relations, and that he was going to do things very, very differently and upend the apple cart, that he was going to change everything. He made very harsh comments about trade relations and trade deals with Japan, with South Korea, and with China. He regularly said China was a currency manipulator and that was the enemy. He said that the trade deal with South Korea cost the United States nearly 100,000 American jobs. Nobody knows where he gets these numbers, by the way. He attacked the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And his rhetoric on trade had nothing to do with reality. Very little. But it was designed to appeal to men like the gentleman in the picture there. That is very angry white males from working class backgrounds who feel that they are losing in this new world of international trade and development, which benefits people on both coasts of the United States, and leaves men like this broke and angry. So on security issues also, Trump was a loose cannon. He argued that Japan and South Korea should shoulder more of the burden for the defense, possibly have their own nuclear weapons. In terms of South China Sea issues, Trump was having engaged in harsh rhetoric on that as well. Rex Tillerson, his then nominee for Secretary of State, said that the United States Navy should simply deny China access to the islands that it has been enlarging in the South China Sea. And after his election, Donald Trump spoke with the president of the Republic of China on Taiwan and openly called for the decades-old American policy on Taiwan to be questioned. So, in short, as a candidate, President-elect Trump really set out some very clear ideas, but they were very radical and promised to change things quite a bit. Also, he seemed ready to rebuild relations with Russia and said very kind things about Russia and Vladimir Putin, and led people to believe that perhaps perhaps Donald Trump was having some very clever policy in which he would retriangulate and do the opposite of what Nixon and Kissinger did in the Cold War, and that he would build relations with Russia in order to counter and further better surround an expansionist China. So let's move to the next slide and see, as president, Donald Trump has, at least to a certain degree and to some appearances, behaved differently and moved to a more status quo situation, status quo policy. And what I mean by this is President Trump's policies have been developed. Everything that he's been doing and that the State Department has been doing, there's a basis there, a long-term basis, an infrastructure of relationships, interests, and people, and that has had some effect. Next slide, please. Yes, when the Prime Minister of Japan, Abe Shinzo, became one of the first world leaders to visit Donald Trump, you see this long-standing relationship in play. Here is Abe playing golf with Trump. This is an echo across the decades of Abe's grandfather, Prime Minister Nobusuke Kishi, and Dwight Eisenhower playing golf in 1957. And next slide, please. This speaks to the long-standing relationships, the degree to which Japan and the United States have a good deal of contacts in common that have been built, and relationships that have been built up over the years to the extent that which even the popular cultures intersect in interesting ways. So in many respects, Donald Trump has pursued policies that are consistent with this agenda of a status quo conservative. For instance, in his talks with Japan, he's dropped all the business about Japan taking advantage of America with regard to trade and emphasized the security issues instead. And Japan, of course, has been receptive to Donald Trump as well. With regard to, next slide, please, to China, President Trump's change was very, very quick. Trump had been, as a candidate, was very harsh on China, but as president, he soon met with Xi Jinping. He dropped his cozy relationship with Tsai Ing-wen very quickly. He stopped he stopped questioning the one China policy, and indeed reassured Xi Jinping that the United States still respects the one China policy. And so he's, in that respect, also moved toward a more conservative status quo position. Next slide. So if he's a status quo conservative, what do I mean? What is he going to pursue? That is, a status quo conservative is going to pursue issues, things like continued strategic ambiguity in the Taiwan Strait, trying to maintain the status quo there, continued military posture, strengthening the military posture towards China, but also maintaining trade relationship to China, that ambiguous relationship that the United States has with China, status quo. Again, the pursuit of trade deals with Korea, Taiwan, and other nations in East Asia, Vietnam included, with respect to, in the context of China. So there's a good deal that is really continuation of things that have been underlying relationships along the lines. But next. Every president has his own style of foreign policy, and President Trump's style is transactional. President Trump is a businessman, and he brings that transactional style to his campaign. He talked consistently about bad deals. He said that Japan and South Korea are getting a free ride. America should be paid for defending them, and so on. And particularly when he faces challenges to the status quo, Donald Trump's transactional style will come out more when he has to deal with new situations. And we can see that in a couple of places. One of the major challenges that he faces, challenges to the status quo, one is the South China Sea. The other is, of course, the Korean Peninsula and Kim Jong-un's pursuit of nuclear weapons. And it has become clear that Donald Trump, the transactional president, at least for the moment, has decided to deal with China. America will drop its allegations of currency manipulation. America will return to the one China policy. America will put the South China Sea on the back burner in return for Xi Jinping's cooperation on the North Korean issue. At least that's what it appears to be happening. What are the possible results of this transactional approach to foreign policy? We can go to the next. On the negative side, a Trump approach could lead to embarrassment, to bad deals, and disappointment. It can lead also to serious questioning of the status quo, as seen more recently in Europe in his European trip and his exchanges with Angela Merkel. It can also lead Donald Trump to make statements that are just really quite strange. On the other hand, if it goes well, and that's a big if it goes well, a transactional approach has the possibility of doing things in a new way. And for instance, a transactional president, if the circumstances were right, could talk more directly with North Korea, which Donald Trump mentioned at one point. And of course, who knows whether he meant it or not, and what did he mean by I could talk to Kim Jong-un under the right circumstances? What are those circumstances?
You have just 1 minute.
Very well. In the next slide then. Donald Trump's transactional style of foreign policy cannot lead to a new vision for peace and prosperity in East Asia all of itself. If there's any common vision, any common goal for East Asia, it will have to be something that emerges from transactions between all of these people. And it's unlikely that all of them will agree on everything. Perhaps in the context of these transactions, some common agreements on some particular issues is possible.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tanner, for your presentation. You seem to persuade us that we don't have to worry about the U.S. new foreign policy under Mr. Trump. You said that Trump will pursue the foreign policy in a more, stable way, kind of, because he is going to pursue the status quo conservative foreign policy. But what do you think the major change between the foreign policy of Donald Trump administration and that of former administration under Mr. Obama?
Thank you. I did say, and I chose my words very carefully, that it appears to a degree that Donald Trump will pursue a conservative status quo, or is pursuing a conservative status quo policy as compared to his campaign rhetoric. It appears, and to a degree, because the great change is Donald Trump's unpredictability. That's the huge change. I think it is his style, his transactional style. Remember that Donald Trump has a style of foreign policy and a style of decision making that is based purely in the present. When I say it's a transactional style, he operates in the present. He doesn't know about history. He doesn't read books. Okay, it's very clear that he doesn't disguise that. Okay, he only operates in the present, which is why he can say things. For instance, he can say, I don't understand why the Israelis and the Palestinians haven't made peace already. It should be very simple. Or he said, well, about American history, he said the American Civil War could have been avoided if people had just negotiated better, which is absolutely silly. Okay, he lives in the present, and that means he's unrestricted, which contains creative possibilities, but it also contains the possibility of very disruptive decisions, and decisions made in complete ignorance of reality. And so that's, I think, the difference. The former president was somebody who was very thoughtful and very well read. Whether you like his policies or not, you knew that he was giving great consideration to them. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tanner. Then next we will have Professor He Tae-wei from Somun University. Professor He, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. And first of all, I'm grateful to Jeju Peace Institute, which gave me this opportunity to make a presentation on the issue of the prospects of East Asia and its leadership. Actually, Dr. Harold Tanner talked about the implication of Donald Trump's the foreign policy for the regional politics. But I'm going to take a more internal approach towards the vision of East Asia, which I think that's more important at this moment. So actually, because as the Dr. Harold Turner has argued that the Donald Trump's foreign policy is unpredictable, then we have another guy who is very unpredictable on the northern part of Korea too. Then nowadays the South Korea has now the new president and who faces very tough diplomatic challenges involving the controversial deployment of the United States' the THAAD battery in South Korea. Then, as we know, the East Asia now has become a sort of growth engine for the global economic development until a few years ago. But it seems to me, has been reduced a place fraught with nowadays uncertainty, confrontation, and anxiety. So now, if you look at the internal dynamics of these regional countries, China now has experiencing a little difficult times, which was caused by deep-rooted corruption and economic inequality. Then China is now facing how it will cope with the growing demands for democratization with its Chinese nationalism. That's one thing. And that's why it's a time for China to figure out breakthroughs in the unstable system that is neither market-oriented nor socialistic. Also, Japan seems to now have been escaping from its long-term economic recession, but the major tasks of Japanese government is also to transform the obsolete political and constitutional system to an advanced one, which can make Japan find their economic growth again. Also, South Korea now recovered from its foreign exchange crisis in a relatively short period, but it has also still many challenges. Not only the North Korean nuclear issues, but also its domestic economic problems too. Japan and Korea both, I think, are not likely to experience a major dramatic change anytime soon, because these countries has already established a democratic market economy and a little stable political system. But China, in case of China, it is totally different story, because China now is trying to expand its economic or political power on at least in the east part of this Asia. If we look at the Chinese trade volume, that is Chinese trade with these three Asian countries constitutes more than 30% of its total trade volume. And now, even though these three countries are trying to make a movement towards the intra-regional economic integration, including the trade expansion. However, from my point of view, the economic interdependence in this region has not reached its height for the region to play a major facilitator's role in boosting the regional peace and economic community. That's the major reason why I'm afraid about this the implication of economic interdependence for this regional politics. The volume and profits of the trilateral trades cannot match those of their trades with other extra-regional partners. This is the reason why I think the East Asian countries are not tempted or not motivated to aggressively work out further economic regional cooperation and collaboration. Furthermore, if we look at the domestic side of the regional politics, it is very regrettable that the political leaders of this region are taking a very nationalistic and very myopic approach towards the vision of the East Asia. I mean that three political leaders of this region, China, Japan, and not this time the South Korea, but most of these political leaders tend to resort to nationalism and very close to regionalism, putting their own benefits or their interests in the first place, and they ignoring the common interests of this region. This kind of the myopic approach will only cast a big shadow over the future of this region. United States, the world's only superpower, is pushing to, as Dr. Harold Turner said, the pivot to Asia policy. Its aim is to solidify its foothold in East Asia and to prevent from Chinese hegemony from occurring in this region. As we know, the United States now defined Chinese aspiration to become a maritime power as 880, which is anti-access and area denial policy. And the United States made a very clear movement, which it has no intention to allow neither Chinese emergence as the second superpower nor the new type of major power relationship proposed by China.
We have just 1 minute.
Okay. As I don't know the people know about this, but actually the Asia, in old times, Asia means the vast, rich, and powerful land that includes the Persian Empire. So Asia means the strong and powerful and vast land. But at the turn of the century, Asia became the symbol of conflicts and the poverty. Then nowadays, East Asia is trying to regain its old name's fame. But if the political leaders of this region keep trying to move towards the closed regionalism and then their nationalistic behavior, then this region has no future. So it's up to their political leaders who are trying to make their movements towards more open regionalism and more nationalism. That's what I think.
Thank you, Professor He. Well, your comments on the future of Asia seems to be quite pessimistic, but let us talk about it later. Then next floor will be Mr. Kimura Khan. You will have the floor. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to move here because simply I cannot see my PowerPoint slides from here. Well, which one? Yes. Okay. Please, yes. Thank you again for your invitation to Jeju Forum. My name is Kanki from Kobe University, and also this is a session regarding on the U.S.-China or more broader international relations. But unfortunately, I am not such a kind of specialist, but also a specialist on the South Korean politics or Japan-Korean relations. So today I'm going to talk, mention about some important points I found from my study regarding on the Japan-Korean or Korean studies. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, thank you. Oh, no, how? Okay, thank you so much. Okay. And now it is almost impossible for us to see what kind of the development policy the new Moon Jae-in government will take. But I believe that we should start our analysis from the experience at the time of Park Geun-hye government. And I understand that Park Geun-hye government was very unique in the diplomatic history of South Korea mainly because Park trying to have a very autonomous diplomatic policy between the very delicate U.S.-China relations. And she put the same level of importance on China as the United States. This is, of course, first experience in South Korean diplomatic history after the independence. And also, even for North Korea, she had very ambiguous trust diplomacy, which was not so clear from whether it belonged to the hard line or soft line. And against Japan, she took the very hard line policy diplomacy on the historical issues against Japan from the beginning of the government. It is a new situation. And we understood that Park Geun-hye believed it was possible for South Korea to do that. But the result, you know the result. Okay, the United States were irritated by such a kind of South Korean stance against China, so they finally pressured South Korean government to have third missile system. So it damaged the U.S.-South Korean relations. And China was also very upset against South Korea because they understood that they have changed. You have changed the diplomatic policy toward China. They believe that they felt that they are betrayed. So that they started economic sanctions. And the relationship with Japan was not developed even after the so-called conformity agreement in 2050, mainly because of the so-called statutes of peace issues between two countries. No, sorry. And behind that, I understand that the Park Geun-hye government had at least two miscalculations. They expected that in the globalizing world, United States, especially the American government under Obama, will keep the very soft line policy against China. I remember many South Korean scholars mentioned about this point, especially in 2013 or 2014, and they criticized us like saying Japan was wrong. You are taking the too hard line policy. But U.S. changed this stance against China after seeing the South China Sea situation. Then they also expected that the liberal U.S. government at the time under Obama will continue and will support them if they criticize the revisionist type of the historical understanding of Abe. But Abe stopped doing that, maybe in the middle of 2014 or the beginning of 2015. And she could successfully have a speech at the U.S. Parliament and could re-establish the very smooth relationship with the United States in 2015. No. Okay, so it shows, it gives us some lessons. This is just a result. U.S. now is very cool or very negative against South Korea if compared with the Lee Myung-pak government situation. And China is having sanction-oriented policies. The Japanese government has very negative stance, no positive reaction to try to develop the relationship with South Korea. And now, about the coming of the new government, it is very clear that U.S. and Japan are very, very afraid of the South Korean so-called leftist government coming. So it means I have to say the South Korean situation is not so good. And let me try to compare this experience under Park Geun-hye government with the experience under Abe government. Park took soft line policy toward China, but had relations damaged very seriously. Abe never took hard line. Abe kept hard line policy against China, but Japan-China relation was not seriously hurt. We are having a lot of good relations, or not. At least we don't have at this moment very concrete issues with China. And of course, South Korea faces serious problems regarding on South, but not finished the alignment. So the issue how to continue will continue. Japan was not pressured by US to have the missile system, but now Japanese defense forces already finished the alignment of so-called X-band radar system. We understand what China is afraid is not THAAD missile system, but the X-band radar system, which has 45,000 kilometers inside of China from South Korean peninsula. This is the normal understanding of the Japanese government. And we already had the X-band system in Shakiri base in Tohoku, Aomori. But this issue was already finished between Japan and China. Chinese government never complained about the Japanese having the X-band radar system. But you are being criticized. So it means that, of course, the issue looks like an issue, but actually it's not, in my understanding. No, seesawing South Korean diplomatic position itself is a reason for them to find the place of the international games. This is, this is not just my personal understanding, but also the Japanese specialists understanding the third issues like this. Maybe Chinese expert will react against that. Okay. So anyway, the space for South Korea between the United States, and of course, even for Japanese, is not broad. It's not so broad. Okay, thank you. So we have to think about what we can do, and also the U.S. the South Korea's positive approach to Beijing would affect how the South Asian allies. So I skip these parts. And I'd like to mention that then what should we do here for Japanese or Koreans? Okay. Now, I look back the South Korean diplomacies, I already found that you have used two words. First one is domestic excuse. Like, because the people are against the agreement or alignment of that, so please understand. Or moralistic approach. At the Park Geun-hye government, South Korean government people use the word like moral high ground, dotok kochi. Okay, we can understand, you feel good, but it never can be a reason for the other people, Japanese or Americans, the Chinese, to follow it. Okay? So you shouldn't talk like a moral teacher. Because simply you can't move the people, Japanese, Chinese, and Americans. Rather, important things is here. I'd like to point out the importance of the very realistic but three important key phrases. We should talk about the interests, not morale. Because we are living in the world, we are having more and more different morals, different values here, as you are seeing on the European or American situation. And if you like to move the people, you should show what kind of interest they can have it. Otherwise, you cannot move the people. And you cannot get any good position in the very delicate, complicated international society. And also give and take. This is also important. I am always asked by the Japanese media or Japanese the public, okay, Kimura-san said that we have to have a negotiation with South Korea. But they say, what can we get? But this is normal. You might be very, frustrated, but this is very normal reaction of the people. And also, you should treat the counterpart like a business partner, not like a friend, not like a husband. We need to have a deal. And I'm going to finish. This kind of democratic attitude is very, I believe, essential in the world. It is becoming more and more publicistic, and people is becoming more and more inward looking. So we should have some ideas to, if you'd like, to move the people and change the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Kimura. I want other presenters to keep your time within the given 10 minutes. Well, Professor Kimura, you have said many things which are very critical to the former President Park Geun-hye's, diplomacy in South Korea. But I think that there might be some perception gap between Korea and Japan on the basic, philosophy of the foreign policy of Park Geun-hye administration. That is, when you said South Korea have put the more weight on the same leveling between the U.S. and China, but our basic foreign policy is that Korea-U.S. alliance is the basic diplomacy scheme in South Korea, on which we are going to develop the relations with China. That is, we have developed the relations with China on the basis of a strong Korea-U.S. alliance. But in many cases, we have heard that the Japanese, not only the politicians, but also many scholars, to raise this issue. The South Korea has changed its diplomacy from putting on the very importance on the U.S.-Korea alliance to the newly, changing, weight on Korea-China relations. But I think there is a very basic perception gap between Korea and Japan. And second thing, that we have not tried to give any moral, lesson to Japanese or to any people in the world. We want just to clarify the past wrongdoings done by imperial, Japanese. We don't want to use it as the diplomatic tool with Japan, but we have put very great importance on the future development of our relations between Korea and Japan. But at the same time, we want to, we do not want to forget the past history between our countries. Because why? Because we or other Asian people want to have the Japanese leadership in this region based upon the very clear perception on the past history. But I will give you a time on the next chance. Please prepare your answer on that. Then next we are going to have another presenter from Russia, Professor Sebastianov from Far Eastern Federal University. You have just 10 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here in the beautiful Jeju Island again, due to a generous invitation from Jeju Peace Institute. Thank you. And so our session is called New Leadership with New Partners. And so far, most kind of colorful leader is Mr. Trump. Yeah, so I would like to begin with his kind of influence, and then I'll try to characterize other changes. So as all of us know, during recent American elections, everybody expected victory of Hillary Clinton with her predictable course on continuing neoliberal globalization, strengthening multilateral cooperation agreements in economics, and something like that. However, win of Donald Trump brought cardinal changes into internal processes in America and triggered political and economic unpredictability in the whole world, as well as in the Asia Pacific. So, as already been mentioned by Professor Tanner, so distinctive feature of Mr. Trump has materialized maybe as unpredictability, and I would add some love for risk, as a businessman. Yeah, he is always formulating maximum aims very quickly, just as the spot, and he doesn't care that maybe he would not necessarily could achieve these aims. Kind of doesn't matter much. Yeah, thus this is the difference between what he wants and what could he really achieve. But what we see, if his new approaches doesn't work, he easily is making steps back, kind of like nothing happened before. Yeah, and for example, he changed his stand in concerning American policy toward Taiwan, as we know well, and actually his stand toward preemptive strike on North Korea also has been changed. First, he was very strong, like who will do it, but then he said, no, we have no such plans, kind of only in distant opportunity or something like that. So, thus, Trump is declaring so-called red lines, but not to be crossed, but then easily cancel them himself. So it's kind of a classic model of his diplomacy, and we agree that he's guided by his previous business experience while deliberately checking resolve of his opponents, but not only opponents, but partners alike. To decide some issues and solve in conflict situations, something like that. It looks like for him, opponents or partners, same story. So he just press everybody with same strengths. So after characterizing this a little bit, I would like to characterize this changing ties with other countries, most important countries in Northeast Asia. And so speaking about China, during the first meeting in Florida with Trump and Xi, formed good personal ties and established 4 high-level dialogue mechanisms focusing on diplomacy, economy, law enforcement, cybersecurity, social, society, culture. So we remember that during presidential campaign, Trump very sharply criticized China for not doing unfair economic behavior. But after becoming the president, he changed his stance for more conciliatory and promised actually to take Chinese interest into consideration during formation and execution of American strategy. And as we remember, soon after that, after the meeting, President Xi called Trump and declared that Beijing would not accept forceful resolution of the Korean Peninsula problem. And it worked. It worked. And now some kind of a little bit about global picture. As we understand, according to Trump, modern globalization is working against American interests. And he declared American exit from Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. But at the same time, while addressing World Economic Forum in Davos, President Xi urged all countries to continue support for economic globalization. So these 2 statements considered together are constituting profound geopolitical and geoeconomic changes in kind of whole world picture. And as we know, for many years, Beijing was forming international economic organizations in the Asia Pacific as alternative structures to those led by Washington. But now Trump kind of led China to lead in multilateral economic cooperation institutions. So while America and Trump plan to focus on bilateral economic agreements that could be easily renegotiated to Washington advantage. And again, the case that free trade agreement between United States and Korea now are kind of under consideration by Washington. Now, as far as Japan, I think President Abe has been lucky to maintain excellent personal ties with Trump and Putin, making frequent visits to America and Russia. This year, he already visited Moscow in April, and in September, he will take part in annual Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, already confirmed. So Abe and Trump are maintaining active contacts on the issue of DPRK. So overall, not speaking much about that, we can expect that Trump would strongly rely upon Abe in advancing and realizing American policy goals in East Asia. That's my kind of prognosis. As far as the Republic of Korea, yes, due to impeachment, Korean political positions have been weakened, and Trump used such a chance to strengthen political and economic pressure on Seoul. Firstly, he used the situation to make it impossible for the new president to deny installment of the American missile defense system THAAD on South Korean territory, and then he declared that U.S.-ROK bilateral FTA should be reconsidered as not satisfying American interests. So now, being under heavy pressure from Washington, it became an urgent and imminent task for President Moon to handle all these issues, to establish balanced relationship with both Beijing and Washington, and also he is facing North Korean kind of issues. So it's really not very easy time for new team, diplomatic team and political team of new president of South Korea. As far as Russia, I think yes, it's already been mentioned. Russian-American relationship are still not very good, and if you watch TV on CNN, NBC, all these companies blasting Russia and every day about Russian spies, and a Russian ambassador became a #1 spy in the world, kind of, Mr. Kislyak, for just doing his job. You know, it was kind of a very unusual kind of situation. Anyway, I think time is needed to pacify a little anti-Russian hysteria in America, triggered by representative of the previous presidential administration, and to arrange the first meeting of two presidents. At this point, so far it is planned in July on the sidelines of G20 summit in Germany. So we will see how well it will go, and whether it will be really kind of serious meeting or just a talk on sidelines. Well, as far as Korean Peninsula security, Moscow is again inviting all parties to negotiation table, and with new president in power, Russia is ready to participate in joint search of new approaches to solving Korean Peninsula problems. As we know, sanctions only will not bring desired results. And so what we know is that President Moon already sent his special envoy to Moscow, so some negotiations have been arranged, and Putin promised to send special envoy to Pyongyang to meet with Kim Jong-un to try to clarify his intentions and future policy course, something like that. So we will see. 1 minute, okay, thank you. So in this context, we are working with other countries together. Then, coming to concluding remarks, what we can do? Well, I think what is lacking is joint trust on this issue. To promote more trust, better relationship, better ties between two Koreas are needed, and a new Korean president should try to exert leadership by constructing a direct dialogue with his Korean DPRK counterpart. And I think in Seoul there are some ideas about that. We will see how it will work. Restoring multilateral cooperation is also valuable, and in this context, secure six-party talks is still the best option. We don't have any other mechanism. And as far as economics, I think Northeast Asia countries should focus on planning And I mean, to remember again, or kind of to think again about realization of joint economic projects, including trilateral economic projects on Korean Peninsula with participation of Russia, Republic of Korea, and DPRK in energy, transportation, and other areas. And my final point is that useful venue for discussing resumption of this project is the annual Eastern Economic Forum that will be in Vladivostok in early September. As far as I understand, a newly elected president of Republic of Korea is already invited, and he would be a very welcome guest in this summit meeting in Vladivostok. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Professor Sebastianov. For your explanation in very much detail. Let me check just one thing. You said that the U.S. has deployed the THAAD in the territory of Korea by taking advantage of the Korean political turmoil influenced by the impeachment of President Park. That's what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Just one of the factors, at least, important factor.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it later. Then let me give the floor to Professor Lee Wie from Center for Northeast Asian Studies, the Pangol Institute. You will have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Professor Sun Yi. Thank you for inviting me here. And I'm talking about the challenges and opportunities for the new leadership of ROK. And here comes the challenges. American foreign policy today reveals some signs or maybe a trend of realism coming back, characterized as unilateralism, anti-globalization, and pursuing a definite security of itself, and recognized as making America great again by America first. The American government is paying more attention to reduction of the international obligation and the trade deficit as well. We all know about the Americans withdrawing from TPP, which had been repeatedly emphasized by Barack Obama, designed to be essentially an instrument for strengthening the U.S. strategic influence in the Asia-Pacific region. We can say that the TPP was the U.S. efforts to lead the regional order and would have brought together regional allies of the U.S. into a common trade framework led by the U.S. But now he gave up. The Trump just gave up. And Mr. Trump is also a strong opponent against the FTA. He had many times criticized the FTA, including the one with South Korea, for killing jobs of Americans. Although the FTA was valued by experts as mutually beneficial, but the U.S. claims that it is tilted in favor of Seoul. Trump has called the free trade agreement with South Korea a horrible deal in a recent interview, saying that Washington has already informed the Seoul government of its intention to renegotiate. The third challenge is the THAAD. Despite of the strong opposition from China and Russia, the deployment of THAAD continues, which is obviously an overreacted countermeasure by the U.S. and South Korea against the North. The American requirement of as high as $1 billion payment made Mr. Moon unhappy again. Now, both the supporters and the protesters of the THAAD are coming to a common situation. The U.S. payment requirement has turned the THAAD a security and defense issue into a problem of trade and business. No matter how much the two countries value the meanings and importance of the political and military alliances between U.S. and South Korea, under these circumstances, people could not help asking that, is there any possibility for the alliance might adapt a new service purchasing mode of no money, no goods in the future? And what if South Korea could not afford it someday? Now, we will have opportunities. North Korea has paying much attention to the launch of liberal President Moon Jae-in's administration by a news report with detailed information. contrasted with his one-sentence dispatch in December 2012, when the former President Park was elected. Although there seems no plan for the North to stop steps toward nuclear power with ballistic missile capability, it still releases some signals of talks and negotiations, which shows its positive perspectives toward South Korea. Besides the U.S. and DPRK talks and Oslo, the North urges the U.S. to replace the armistice with a peace accord. Furthermore, North Korea mentions several times agreements reached during the past years with South Korea. Here comes the America again. Mr. Tillerson, Secretary of the State, during his meeting with President Moon's special envoy mid-May, expressed the country's willingness to return to dialogue with Pyongyang if it shows sincerity through actions such as halting the nuclear and missile tests, according to the report. The secretary said the Donald Trump administration's policy goal is not to pursue a regime change or aggression, but to ensure regime security and trust us instead of using the back channels. Russia also plays a very productive role in these nuclear issues. Based on media report, Russia President Vladimir Putin said May 12 that his country was ready to play a productive role in ending the North Korea nuclear issue, also promising to enhance this country's cooperation with South Korea during a phone call to Mr. Moon Jae-in. And according to the report, referring to Russia's stance at a seminar organized by the East Asia Foundation in Seoul on April 28th, our position is very clear and coincides with China's. Russia is for political and diplomatic solutions, inter-Korean cooperation, and six-party talks. The sanctions cannot be based on trying to topple the regime. And Chinese government has proposed a resolution of double suspensions, Pyongyang stopping its nuclear and missile tests, and Washington and Seoul halting their annual military exercises near North Korea. Under the current sanctions regime could not be annulled by itself. And the international community could achieve more by seeking political and diplomatic solutions rather than the further isolation of the kingdom. Now I think it's time for Korea to take the lead. Moon is widely expected to seek engagement with North Korea to improve long-strain ties, just as the Russia scholars suggested. According to a report by the South Korea media, the first stop is to de-escalate the tensions. We can go back later and work toward complete denuclearization, but we first have to put the brakes on North Korea, as most of the U.S. State Department's high-level positions remain unfilled, and neither China nor Russia can decisively control the North Korea. It is time and demand that the Moon administration should take the driver's seat in guiding the tour to directly engaging with Pyongyang. Thank you. That's all my point.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lee Wei.
Yes.
So we have just around 25 minutes to go. So, well, we have to use it very usefully. So I will give you one question to each of you. Then you will have just 2 or 3 minutes to answer. Then we'll get some questions from the floor. So, to Mr. Tanner, then what do you think Mr. Trump or the U.S. government will try to break a deal with North Korea under what kind of circumstances? That is one question for you. Then to Professor He, you said about the so-called myopic approach by Korea, Japan, and China based upon the very closed nationalism. Then what would be the next step for these countries to try to get the common value in Asia? Then to Professor Kimura, what does Japan want to have from the newly emerged Korean government under President Moon, which has been quite critical about the former deal on the so-called comfort women issue. Then Mr. Sebastianov, you said that there is no alternative to six-party talks. But the six-party talks has been pursued based upon the denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. But North Korea has denied to denuclearize. So and it has declared that North Korea has already become the so-called nuclear weapon state, which was also stipulated in their constitution. Then, do you think that the six-party talks can work under these circumstances in the future? Then, Professor Lee, so the relations between the U.S. and China will be the most important factor, which will, decide the future and picture of East Asia in terms of the security or economic, new order, international order. Then, what is your, prospect on the future relations between the U.S. and China? Then, what would be the major, topic or major theme we should not lose in keeping the U.S. and China in a very good relations? Okay, Mr. Tanner, you will have just 2 or 3 minutes.
Thank you. First, I think it was rather interesting that both my Russian colleague here and I had rather similar interpretations of Donald Trump's situation and style of leadership. With regard to your question, under what circumstances would Donald Trump deal with North Korea? I think as an American president, Donald Trump would need North Korea to visibly do something to give something up before Donald Trump could have the option the excuse to do that while maintaining legitimacy with his own public, particularly his own party. Perhaps because he has a reputation for being so extreme, Donald Trump is uniquely able to talk to North Korea in the same sense that we said only Richard Nixon could visit China because only a Republican could in the early 1970s talk to China without being accused of being a communist, whereas a Democratic Party American leader would not have been able to do that. So perhaps Trump, by being so extreme, is in a position of being able to talk to North Korea. But North Korea would have to give up something. There would have to be some visible sacrifice, and perhaps that would only happen if China was able to talk North Korea into or pressure North Korea into doing such a thing. But the question then would be, would it be in China's interest to do that? So it's an interesting hypothetical question. I honestly don't see how it would happen. I don't see what North Korea would give up.
Then in case of there is no give up or sacrifice on the part of North Korea, there will be no deal between the U.S. and North Korea?
Yeah.
Then what kind of things Mr. Trump will do under that circumstances?
Transactional approach.
Do you think, any kind of military option is still plausible?
I don't realistically know. I think that even the people around Mr. Trump, and it's true that Mr. Trump does not have a lot of East Asia experts in his. He has not staffed up the State Department. East Asia people who have expertise within the State Department are also frustrated with him because he doesn't listen to them. And the fact that I can say that, by the way, I am not a person inside the Beltway. The fact that somebody who is a simple professor from the University of North Texas has insight into State Department people being frustrated with Donald Trump indicates how frustrated they are. I would never have heard about this otherwise. Something very strange would have to happen for Donald Trump to
Okay, let's wait and see. Anyway.
But no, I don't think military option is on the table because even Donald Trump and his advisors understand how disastrous it would be.
Okay, thank you. Then, Mr. Professor Ha.
Okay.
What?
You gave me the question of the common values of the East Asia. Then, as I talked to you in the first place, that Asia was meant to be the region of the best and richest population, which including the Persian Empire. So a long time ago, the Mongolian Empire kept pushing its influence on the eastern part of Europe, and also all the times that the Persian Empire was famous for having great influence on the European civilization back then. But even about 10 years ago, there was some movements among these countries which make towards, let's go to make a movement towards the economic integration or economic community like that. But nowadays, that was totally gone. What is talking about the East Asian economic community like that? So what I'm concerned is most about the future of the prospects of the Asia, East Asia is I think Dr. Kimura-san also mentioned about that. The political leaders of these three countries are now that tend to take more the nationalistic approach towards their domestic politics because they want to get more popularity from the public in order to have the regime more stable. That's why I'm worried about this. And these leaders or the three East Asian countries should learn about the more lessons coming from the European Union, which was used to be the very complete written reason, but that was now transformed to the economic and political community, right? That's why these days these political leaders of these three countries now go forward more the open-minded and show their more the common the vision of the Asia. That's only in that way that the East Asia has the future of the economic one community and economic the political stability too. That's what
so thank you, Mr. Professor. So that means you said that we have to get lessons from the unity of Europe as a form of European Union, something like that. Well, anyway, I think it can be a very different topic because they say there are many differences between Europe and Asia, including the historical experience. But anyway, that's okay, a good idea. Then next we move to Mr. Kimura.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I have to react also to your previous comments. So, my understanding is very simple. I'm originally the analyst, the specialist of the discourse analysis. So I'm always analyzing what kind of things are taught in each society. So when we look at today's situation, the populistic world or populist society has some shared characteristics. First one is they are very inward-looking, and the secondly, the people are very short-sighted. They have no room to think about a very long-term interest or something. And they had very strong distrust against all the elites. And also they had very strong distrust against old morals, which was supported by the old establishments. And so everybody talk about just their interests and not morals. Or even when they mention about the moral, it is not today's moral, but the old moral, much more old and traditional moral. So, my baseline is, yes, I also believe that there are a lot of problems about that kind of understanding, but that kind of today's situation should be, or just must be the basis of our diplomatic policy, because we cannot change the other people's situation or understanding of the other country from outside. So we should start from this situation. And so the things one thing I cannot talk at my presentation is even in Japan. So I don't know, by definition, I'm not sure about Abe is populist or not. But anyway, Japan also had the same kind of situation. People are very inward-looking, short-sighted, and against the old type of the liberal, especially liberal morals. So it means that in Japan, there is no country. In Japan, we have no society which help South Korean politics or diplomacy without showing any interest for the public. There is no such kind of Japan anymore. And maybe there will be no such kind of United States anymore if the United American situation is being more populistic. So I said that we have to talk in the words of the interest. And so on the perception gaps, okay. So on the perception gaps, the importance of China to Japan and South Korea is different, very totally different. So we have to have the perception gaps. So for everything that you explain to your situation, our public will never say yes. They say, oh, this is your situation, our situation is different. And because it is simply because that the whole mass or public, there is no reason for them to accept the South Korean perception. Well, ours and ours, you and yours. And so, on the future-oriented something. Well, for such kind of people, they have no room. They have no room to think about the very future. They are living in the very short-sighted society, struggling to find everyday, right to just spend everyday rights. We have to have a logic to persuade such kind of people. That's the point. So my last thing is so conflict issue. So I guess you may explain the South Korea situation reason for the negotiation, and you may talk about the human rights or something. But I will have to say that such a kind of approach will never move the Japanese people and Japanese politicians. For that, the things, two things. First, one of the things is, we have to keep the communication first. And the second one is, this is the thing that South Korea and the Japanese have to think about. We have to explain why Japan-South Korea relation itself is important for ourselves. But nobody explained it.
Okay.
They said that
You've used 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's my part.
Yeah. Then Professor Sebastianov.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's about six-party talks. My question is about six-party talks. Yes, I said that it's no alternative for this mechanism. And you mentioned that this organization of forum has been based on the goal of denuclearization. And of course you are right, it has been the case. So then how we may go further? What is the value of this structure? Of course, I agree with you, there is some controversy here, but from Russian standpoint and I think a Chinese standpoint, it could be overcome. If we define denuclearization of the whole Korean Peninsula as a more distant goal. So what should we do, could we do? We should start these negotiations without any preconditions. This is our point, as of course many of you know about it. And we should work on discussing and realizing measures to improve trust between participants. So, of course, we should insist that DPRK stop nuclear development programs and development of ballistic missile delivery systems, all this stuff. But for what? What we can propose in exchange? I think guarantees in security from United States, first of all, and other countries, and more active economic cooperation, economic help, and easing of economic sanctions, and then maybe lifting of them. Because, for example, Russia started several projects with North Korea, but in economics, but now all of them stopped.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sebastianov. Well, there are, many opinions like that, even in South Korea. That's true. But what we are afraid that it might be another repeat
Cycle
of the
kind
past
of.
failure. Just let me let's say just about
guarantee,
it. Then lastly, Professor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying. Thank you for your questions, and I'm trying to make my answers as short as possible. And one, I think the Northeast Asia is just a part of the huge political and business map of the American politics. Northeast Asia is not everything for America. So whatever happens or whatever they are doing here, just will end up in the election domestically. And what will affect the election of the U.S.? I think there are two major facts. One, economic growth. Second, overseas threats, including the terrorism and the nuclear threats by now, today, from the from North Korea. So, and according to China, what concerns China most is that maybe first, social studies. China wants studies domestically. Second, and peaceful international neighborhood environment for our development. Second is the economic growth. The third comes the economic growth. So that's what China concerns most. Now China is making or has reached many agreements or effective agreements with the U.S. We all know their business and trade agreements recently, and so I think as long as we have softened or smoothly business or trade bilateral relationships and the political relations between the two countries and over the Northeast Asia.
Thank you.
Be good.
Yeah. Professor Tanner, do you have any very simple comment to Professor Lee's comment on his perception that the North Asia is not everything to the U.S.?
It's clear. It's kind of clear.
I think it's an accurate statement. Northeast Asia is one aspect of the United States as global issues.
Maybe not the largest one.
But just the one part.
It's one part. It's an important part.
Not mostly part.
I think it's an important part because of the North Korean situation.
Yeah.
I think that makes it an important part. Also, also the United States trade with China and with Japan, particularly with China, makes Northeast Asia and East Asia as a whole particularly important for the United States and particularly problematic.
Okay, thank you. Well, we just have 6 minutes to go. Then I think we have two audience who are going to raise a question or say some comments. Anything is okay.
Organization. Do you mind if I go first because I have to go for
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Do you mind?
Yeah. Actually, he's from the Straits Times from Singapore. Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ambassador, for giving me the opportunity. This is for Professor He or maybe Ambassador Shin. You might like to respond yourself. See, we in Southeast Asia, I'm coming from Singapore, and we also suffered from Japanese occupation, atrocities, and all that. But we managed to sort of forgive the Japanese and move on. We're not forgetting, but we sort of managed to forgive. And we work very effectively with them. What stops your country from emulating the Southeast Asian example?
My question is also related to this one. My comment toward Professor Kimura, because as organizing community among other issues, North Korean nuclear threat, but I want to utilize this opportunity to appreciate my neighbor countries concerning the comfort woman issue. I think the President Moon also declared, I want a truthful apology from Japanese Prime Minister. I think that's too ambiguous to appreciate my neighbor countries, which might be misunderstood by neighbor country. Probably South Korea don't want to improve bilateral relationship with Japan. They just only intended to screw up the relationship with Japan. That is my suggestion. President Moon declared what is the truthful apology, which is Japanese government right what they did during the Pacific World War II against Korean women. They mobilized by the military and the government, the sex slave, and they did crime against humanity. Wrote in the textbook of high school or elementary school and teach them. That might be truthful apology instead of a few words by Prime Minister or even by your divine emperor. It doesn't necessarily count. I think write on the textbook what you did or commit against Korean woman, that might be truthful apology. Then we will count on it and we can improve our relationship with Japan.
Well, thank you. Well, I think this is the issue. Without any, end or limit. So let's stop here on this issue. If I have another chance to talk about this issue with you, then I will give you my opinion on it. Okay. I think we can have another chance.
Can I ask Prof. Tanner a question? Could I ask?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You just have 3 minutes.
I'll
Just 1 minute for the question and 2 minutes for the answer.
In the Trump era and beyond, because it looks to me that Trumpism is not going to go away even if you remove Trump from office, what should people in East Asia and Southeast Asia who are dependent on the U.S. as a security linchpin, what should we do to prepare for the future?
Perhaps you should.
Very broad question.
Very broad question, and I don't want to be in the position of telling you what to do. It's not my place. I think that Angela Merkel very recently said that we in Europe cannot rely on the United States, and I have also heard that in the leadership of South Korea and of Japan, while trying to make the best of the relationship with Donald Trump and to flatter him and to establish a good relationship with him, that privately within the systems they're telling people prepare for situations in which the United States simply cannot be relied upon. And this, of course, may lead to all sorts of unintended consequences, because if Japan, Korea, for instance, decide, well, we can't rely on the United States, then what should they do? Well, the answers are going to be things like we should develop our own militaries more strongly, or we should develop new weapon systems, or we should, or alternatively, we should start recalibrating and move more closer to China rather than rely on the United States. All of these are different options, aren't they?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. See you. Well, we have exhausted our limited time on a very broad, topic, which is, linked to the Northeast Asia peace and stability in the future. Well, thank you for each presenter from the U.S., Korea, Japan, Russia, and China. And I really appreciate for your very useful, presentation and comments on this issue. And thank you for the audience, and thank you for the Jeju Forum. We are going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. talk too much.
It's very rare case.